just give the usual warning that this meeting will be live streamed, and if anybody doesn't want to appear on the screening, please could you advise the council officer at the end. Thank you. If we then move on to the agenda for the meeting tonight, and the first item is apologies for absence.
Yes, Chairman, apologies have been received from Councillors Hoban, Syed Hussain and Councillor Woodvine.
Thank you.
And Luke Lancaster, sorry.
Right, thank you. Urgent business, I've not been notified of any urgent business.
None received, Chairman.
Thank you. Declarations of interest, has anybody got any interest in items? Councillor Hussain. It's at item 13. Where you, yeah, and you believe in the meeting at that stage. Thank you. Any public questions?
None received, Chairman.
Thank you very much. The minutes of the last meeting have been circulated. I'll move them as a correct record.
Sorry, Chair.
Sorry?
My name's spelled incorrectly on the...
Right. We'll correct that, and other than that, everybody finds them okay. Thank you. If we then move on to the applications for this evening, and the first two I'll take together because it's exactly the same application, but one's for the listed building consent as well as the planning. So if I could ask Mr. Lee to introduce it.
Thank you very much, Chair. So yes, as you say, agenda items 6 and 7, these relate to the same site, which is the former NatWest Bank at Mumps. The application site is the Grade 2 listed building, which is in a very highly prominent location at Mumps, which is specifically within the red line boundary you can see on the plan, which is adjacent to Walshaw Place, Mumps itself, and Walshaw Street, and close to the, well, immediately adjacent to the Metrolink and the bus depot. So the building itself, there are some images that will follow this slide, has been vacant for believed to be over 10 years now. So we have two applications to consider. Agenda item 6 is the full planning application, and essentially that seeks a change of use of the building, which you can see in the image here, to offices. And the item at item 7 is the linked listed building consent application, and essentially that's seeking works to the Grade 2 listed building to facilitate that proposed office use. So just really important, just echoing what the Chair said there, that each requires a separate decision because the material planning considerations for each are different, but in terms of a proposal they are one of the same. So for the planning application, the principle of the proposed use is acceptable, and that's given it's an office, which is a main town centre use, which is defined specifically in the National Planning Policy Framework, and also supported by our local plan policy, which is Policy 15 for centres. If you know the site, you'll know it's in a very highly sustainable location, and you know, there's an opportunity here for an active use of a large prominent Grade 2 listed building, and therefore that aligns to some of the corporate objectives set out also in the local planning policy 1. So there's been no objections received to the application, the planning application from any of the consultees, but that is subject to the imposition of conditions which are referenced in the report, and the planning application is recommended for approval. The second application, which is item 7 for the listed building consent, this concerns the alterations to the building. So the component parts of all of the proposals are itemised in the report, but essentially includes significant repair and replacement works to the roof, and some of the internal fittings and fixtures, including internal partitions, timber panelling, and the decor. what we have to do is give a weighting when we're looking at harm to designated heritage assets, and that's set out in the National Planning Policy Framework. So an important thing to say is the case officer for these applications has been our own conservation officer, who considers that the totality of all of the harm, so all the changes to the building, equate to what we call less than substantial harm. We can consider such harm to be acceptable where the public benefits clearly outweigh the extent of that harm, which clearly here the reuse of such a large prominent building that's currently vacant more than does that. So in short, that application is also recommended for approval subject to the conditions set out in the report. So that's the introduction, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. Has anybody got any questions of the officer? If not, we go into a debate on the item. I think this building, as everybody will know, has been empty now for 10 plus years, and I think it'd be a great bonus for it to be brought back into use. Does anybody else want to comment on it? No? Councillor Wilkinson?
Councillor Williamson, actually, but anyway. Who is the Conservation Officer then, please?
The Conservation Officer is Paula Stebbings. Yep.
Could I formally, if there's no other comments, could I formally move approval of the application? This is the planning application in the first instance.
Second.
Those in favour, please show. And secondly, could I move the building consent for the listed building?
Second that.
Second. All those in favour? Thank you very much indeed. You will then go on to the next item on the agenda, which is Huddersfield Road, Oldham, 250, and that's conversion into a house of multi-occupation from a public house. Mr. Lee again.
Okay. Yep, thank you, Chair. So, yes, this application, 250 to 252 Huddersfield Road in Oldham, essentially it proposes a change of use of the property to a HMO, a house in multiple occupation, and it's referred to committee for a determination because the applicant is understood to be related to Councillor Mushtaq. So the site comprises a two-storey end terrace property, which is in the red line on the site plan here. It's previously occupied by the Farmers Boy Public House and located on the southern side of Huddersfield Road between the adjacent Asda supermarket and Spring Street. And it's understood the building has been vacant since the back end of 2021. So the application seeks permission to use the building for an 11-bedroomed HMO, which necessitates, in terms of exterior changes, 2 additional windows, one on the side elevation and one on the rear. So the main, you can see some images on the screen here which show the context of the site from the front and the side, and again some aerial images here that show the property with a wider street scene perspective here, with the property being on the left side of this particular image. So the main issues for consideration are whether the principle of the use is acceptable in this location, whether the absence of any dedicated off-road parking is acceptable in this case, and the impact on residential amenity, which is twofold in terms of looking at the amenity of existing residents, but also whether the proposal provides appropriate accommodation for future occupiers. So in terms of the principle, the application would facilitate the active use of a building and offer a residential development in a highly sustainable location in terms of its access to key services and public transport options. Whilst it's noted that there's no dedicated off-road parking provision associated with this particular application, our highway engineer has raised no objections on highway safety grounds although that is subject to the imposition of a condition for the provision of secure cycle parking facilities for future residents. And you'll see from the recommendation that's included at condition 3. So the alterations to the building do include a window on the rear elevation, which on this particular image here is this window in the corner on the single-storey element, and it's on the side elevation at ground floor of a new window opening in this location here. So the actual windows and their location doesn't give any rise to any impact on residential amenities. There's very lucky loss of privacy, for example, because of the interface distance with the nearest existing dwellings. In terms of the quality of the accommodation and the layout, the sizes of the bedrooms and wider accommodation do meet the council standards in terms of its own standards on for HMOs, but also the bedroom sizes comply with the national space standards, and we've had no objections from environmental health in terms of the provision of this particular accommodation in this format and layout. So, having regard to all of these considerations, the application is recommended for approval, subject to the conditions in the report. Thank you.
Thank you. Has anybody got any questions of Mr. Lee? Councillor Cosgrove.
It's just a query because I do know the area because I live nearby, and there is constant parking on the footpath outside which blocks the actual crossing. So if you're coming out of Asda, you can't see anybody waiting to cross. And I'm just wondering if something could be done to block the parking on that front footpath. There's a vehicle there, isn't it, there?
Yeah, so we can look at that because that's an existing problem, and that might even be related to the pub. So the activity related to the HMO will be slightly different, and you probably won't get as many taxis and things drawing up. So it might improve anyway.
If it's been vacant since 21, then it's been happening in the last few weeks. So,
right,
and that's what I'm bringing it up.
I'll pass that on to our traffic section. I'm not sure that we can do anything relating to an HMO, can we? No. Can we? No. I will pass that to our traffic section.
I do think this is an enforcement issue, and certainly we'll take it up with the police. The reason why I say that is double yellow lined, and also it's actually the area itself is covered by a pelican crossing zigzag line as well. So it's a matter of enforcement really. So I think that I think there's a takeaway, and there's also a chemist adjacent to this building. I think that might be something that we'll look at in enforcement terms. Has anybody else got any questions of the officer at all? No? Okay, we've got one speaker on this, and that's Mr. Mushtaq, who is speaking in favour of the application.
Hi, I'm Type Mushtaq, Director, First Choice Investments. I don't really need to say much, hopefully, because there's no objections, but we've taken quite a few sites similar, and we bring them back to life and, you know, create housing or good development. So we did the RBS Bank just across from the Odeon Cinema in the last couple of years, and recently we're working on a couple of buildings on Yorkshire Street. One was working on the Bamboogie nightclub, Yates's Bar it's called, top of Queen Street, and then the building next door to it. So these buildings are being disused and, you know, like basically empty for several years, so we're bringing them back to life. And this would be somewhat similar if it wasn't used. So hopefully, a lot of the time as well, we're giving a lot of these units back to Oldham Council, to Albert. So basically, it's a development given back to the council to house people that need much needed stock. So in that sense, it's hopefully a win-win. But yeah, for social housing, that's all it is. That's all I've got to say. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mushtaq. Has anybody got any questions of Mr. Mushtaq? No. Councillor Hussain.
Sorry. The condition 3 refers to secure cycle parking. Would that be on premises or off premises?
I believe that's in the rear yard, so it's in the rear. We actually have a plot of land at the back which previously had planning for a bungalow as well. That the back there, the blue. So, but in between the building, we're demolishing a little bit of the building as well at the back, the toilets. So there's plenty of space in the rear yard for a bike store. But we do that with any other HMOs we've done in the past. We always provide bike stores. A lot of people living in these type of properties are normally using bikes and public transport, and it's on a main road, easy access to town centre, and other amenities are close by as well. So I think that helps the site as well.
Thank you. Any further questions?
Oh, sorry.
The application is open for debate, a comment, if anybody would like to make comment on it. If not, could I move approval?
I'll second that.
All those in favour of approval, please show. Thank you. Those against? Those abstaining? There you go. Right, if we move on to the next item, which is, that's approved. If we move on to the next item, which is Builder Centre, Calder Street, Oldham, and this is an application for change of use.
We're swapping our offices over. So.
Right.
Miss Breeny.
Sorry?
We miss Breeny.
Right. Right. Ms. Breen will present this application.
The application relates to the former Jewson Builders Merchants on Calder Street. The site's 1.2 hectares in area and therefore is a major development requiring determination by Planning Committee. The application is for a change of use from a builder's merchants, which is a sui generis use class, which is a use class all of its own, to purposes falling within use classes B2, general industry, and B8, storage. The intended end user will operate as a materials processor for the receipt, processing and baling of paper, cards and plastics. All works are to take place within the existing buildings on the site. The use is proposed for processing of materials, but it falls outside of the definition of a waste transfer station. Vehicle movements are proposed Monday to Friday, 6 AM till 6 PM, and Saturdays, 6 AM till 1 PM. The current use as a builder's merchants is unrestricted in its hours of operation. The proposal would ensure the continued employment use within the location, and existing neighbours are separated from the site by mature planting. The Environmental Health Officer has requested a condition to detail how the development will protect the neighbouring properties from disturbance from the use, and the condition will include details of how vehicles will load and unload at the site and the measures to be put into place to minimise noise disturbance, including the times for vehicle manoeuvres. And that's an aerial view looking from the south of the site, so you can see that the is that my pointer? That's the existing car park and the existing outdoor storage, and it relates to these buildings here. Which is there's the car parking, and those are the buildings there.
Right, thank you very much indeed. Has anybody got any questions in regard to the application? Yes, Councillor Shaw.
Thank you, Chair. Just a small question for me. I'm the ward councillor for that area as well. So I know obviously there's a lot of vehicles coming up and down that road anyway at the moment. But my main concern is obviously no one's objected to it, which is fine. But potentially, if this application was to be granted, I'm just worried about the noise levels from vehicles and trucks and vibrations of the roads and things like that, because there's a lot of elderly people that live around that area. There's a Trinity House, which is like a residential care home. So I'm just thinking about the impact of the large vehicles coming in and out. Will it be substantially more than what it is now? And how will that impact the residents of that area? Thank you.
But the current use as a builder's merchant is unrestricted, so there's no restriction on the number of vehicles or the size of vehicles currently accessing the site, which we expect to be large vehicles anyway, bringing on building materials and removing building materials. But the condition that we're seeking to impose will detail the number of vehicle movements and the times of vehicle movements as well, to try and restrict any disturbance to neighbours as much as possible.
Thank you. Is there any further questions at all? No. Okay, we've got no speakers on this particular item, so it's open for discussion and debate and comment. If any member has any comments.
Check and move to a vote.
Yeah. I would move approval.
Second.
It's seconded. All those in favour of approval, please show. Right. Thank you very much indeed. The next item we have is Waterloo Street car park, Waterloo Street, and this is for installation of charging units. If you could introduce it, please.
Sorry. This application relates to 6 car parking spaces on the Waterloo Street car park, which is a council-owned car park. The proposal is for the installation of 4 electric vehicle charging points across 4 car parking spaces along the northern boundary of the site, which is here, and the replacement of an existing EV charging point there on the north-western boundary of the site. The application is referred to Planning Committee alongside 2 similar applications because the council is the landowner and the applicant, and there have been objections to one of the 3 applications. It's recommended that Planning Committee approve the application subject to the conditions set out in the report, which include, as part of the conditions, the submission of an arboricultural impact assessment to ensure that there is no damage to the mature trees along the boundary of the site. Planning permission is only required for the charging points because the siting of the charging points is within 2 metres of an adopted highway. Otherwise, it wouldn't need planning permission. So that's what the charging points would look like. And just in the background there, you can see that is the existing charging point. So they would be here along these spaces, and then in the background there is the replacement charging point.
Thank you very much. Has anybody got any questions at all? Comments? Councillor Hussain?
The proposal is installation of 2 times rapid taxi PHV chargers. Will this be simply used for the taxi drivers alone, or will they be open to accessible to the public as well?
The 4, the ones on the 4 spaces would be just for taxis, but the replacement ones would be a replacement for the existing users of the Waterloo Street one.
Which are the replacement ones?
Here. So those 4 spaces would be for taxis, and those would be a replacement for the existing charger on the site. There's 2 for each space. There's 1 charging point covers 2 spaces, so there's 2 cables come out.
Councillor Gloucester?
Thank you, Chair. Can I just ask then how that will be enforced? Because obviously it's a public car park. How will we make sure it is only taxis that use it? And is that a normal procedure? Is it normal to restrict taxis to using charging points other than other people? Because I honestly don't know the answer myself, so thank you.
Wendy?
Yeah. So there'll be a sign to say that it's only taxis and private hire vehicles, and if a different class of vehicle is using it, they'll that will then be enforced, so they'll get a ticket. Well, it's the car park, it's a council car park, yeah.
Councillor Surgeon.
Thank you. You know, for the EV charging points, will it be like a contactless payment system as well for the taxis, or is it just for the public use one?
Yeah, we haven't got the exact detail, which we don't need it for the, just to determine the planning application. So I don't know the answer to that question, but it will only be for taxi drivers and private hire vehicles to use those, and then the replacement is for normal vehicle owners.
Is there any further questions at all? No? Okay. If not, could I move approval?
Yeah, second that.
That's seconded? Yeah. All those in favour of approval? Yeah.
I think that's unanimous, Chair.
Yeah, thank you. That's unanimous. If we can go on to the next one, which is a very similar application, which is the Peel Street car park in Chadderton.
Okay, this application relates to 4 parking spaces situated on the western boundary of the car park on Peel Street. Please ignore my map that's upside down. It's these spaces here, which when you view on Google Maps is the bottom spaces just there. Similar to the previous application, it includes 2 charging points across the 4 spaces for private hire vehicles. This application is also referred to Planning Committee with the other 2 applications because the council is the applicant and landowner, and there is an objection to the next application that's coming up. Again, planning permission is only required because of the proximity to the adopted highway. It's within 2 metres, because that is the back of the footpath there. So that's what it looks like in the street, and the charging points would be situated here inside of the car park.
Right, thank you. Has anybody got any questions or comments? Nobody at all, no? If not, could I move the recommendation of the officers, which is to approve?
Second that.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you. And then we go on to the next application, which is for Rattler Street Precinct Car Park in Royton.
The proposal relates to the installation of 2 electric vehicle charging points across 3 car parking bays alongside the southern boundary of the car park. The 3 parking bays in question are currently set out as disabled bays, and the proposal will result in the disabled bays being moved approximately 6 metres to the north-east and the creation of 4 disabled bays in lieu of the 3 disabled bays to be lost. So there are the disabled bays, there are the disabled bays at the moment, and that is where they would be repositioned to. This application again requires planning permission because the upstands are within 2 metres of the adopted highway. This application has been referred to Planning Committee as the council is the applicant and landowner alongside the other 2 previously approved schemes. However, this application has been the subject of objections from neighbouring business. The objections relate to the loss of disabled bays for mother and baby parking. It should be pointed out that the bays are currently set out as disabled parking bays, and the disabled bays will be replaced approximately 6 metres across. Excuse me, that's my entire presentation. So currently those are the disabled bays in question, and standing on site, those are the disabled bays to be lost, and that is where the 4 new disabled bays will be positioned.
Thank you. Anybody got any questions of the officer? No? Councillor Cosgrove.
Just a quick one. The new disabled bays will be exactly the same as the old ones, so the spaces between, not close like we've got at Tommyfield. Yeah, that's fine then.
Sorry? All right. Right. Has anybody got any more questions of the officers? No. Right. We do have a speaker on this, and it's an objector who's speaking, and it's Mr. Craig Simpson. Mr. Simpson, I will have 3 minutes to speak. When it's nearing the time, the officer will say that you're nearing the end of the time. So, in your own time, please.
Thank you.
Go ahead.
Thank you. I'm actually from the business adjacent to these sites. That wasn't quite correct what you asked the question there. They won't be the same size because the area is not the same size as what they're taking away. Firstly, directly next to my premises, within less than 1.5 metres, will be a unit that will be installed next to the public path. Mother and toddlers can't get through there with a double pram when that is erected. Also, what's not been stated about these taxis stroke public hires, minibuses can charge at these units. As you can see from the length of the bay, the 5.5 metres, so they stick out quite a distance. A long wheelbase transit minibus will stick out that sort of distance. So if there are any of my customers that are walking out from the nursery, well, it's not a nursery, but the play centre, will have to walk round any of these taxis, stroke minibuses, into the car park themselves, walking into traffic. This has been very, very badly thought out. The 2 applicants that you've passed, applications that you've passed, they're not in town centres. They're both out of the all right, the Waterloo is in a town centre, but it's not part of a shopping precinct centre like this one. We have limited spaces for all the businesses, not for the businesses, but for our retail people that come and shop. Taking these spaces is vital to the survival of Royton. And that's what's happening here. There are far better areas for these to go. I'm not saying we shouldn't have them. Just as a matter of interest, these bays are being put in within 150 metres of 2 already that are installed at Lidl. So there's 2 installed at Lidl within 150 metres that don't get used. I know we've got to spend this money, but spend it wisely and think about where we're putting these things, because this is just not where it should be going. These should be for
30 seconds left.
Shoppers and people that want to use the precinct, not for taxis taking the precinct up.
Thank you very much, Mr. Simpson. Has anybody got any questions at all of Mr. Simpson? Councillor Pethian.
Yeah, I've just got something to say. There's residents and businesses are not happy with this in Royton, are they? Right? I know that from personal experience. So what's going to happen is this is going to be approved tonight, but then it's going to be looked at to be put somewhere else in the borough. This is the information that I've received from the leader of the councillor, Councillor Amanda Chatterton. So that's where we're at with it, basically.
Has anybody else got any questions of Mr. Simpson? Councillor Williamson.
So if they were to be installed, these charging points, where would you want the disabled bays then? Where they are now?
What is the point in costing more money ripping disabled bays out that are there now to move them 20 yards? Put these bays somewhere where they're going to get used. There's a taxi rank 500 yards away. Put them near the taxi rank. It doesn't make sense. There's no common sense at all. The guys who's drawn this up, the plans, don't live round Royton. They're from Sowerby Bridge and Salford. They've no idea of what's going on. They just think, oh, that looks nice, we'll put it there. No common sense. Nobody's come round to any of the businesses or anyone and said, what do you think? It just, like I said, doesn't make sense. Just a little bit of talking, that's all it needed.
Thank you.
Has anybody else got any questions? Councillor Gloucester?
So just going back to your previous comment about the disabled bays, are you saying that they won't be as large as they currently are? Is that correct?
So if you look at the plans there now, there are 3 bays put in place where the 2 chargers are. That is where the 3 disabled bays are placed now. The plan is to scale, so you don't need to be a rocket scientist to see that them 3 won't go into the 4. So there won't be any space for anybody to get in and out of disabled bays.
Councillor Gloucester?
In terms of my earlier question about them being allocated to only taxi and private hire vehicles, obviously shoppers will be looking for electric charging points in the very near future, we hope. Would that ease the situation if the disabled bays were looked at and then, you know, there was not a restriction on those bays for private hire vehicles? Because I completely get this. It's fine putting charging points in, but if nobody can use them, it's a waste of time and money. So
the precinct, the car park, it is mainly for all the shoppers that go on the precinct. So it's not helping any of the shoppers, them chargers being on that precinct car park. I will repeat what I said. There are 2 chargers now, brand new ones, put in on Lidl's car park that don't get used. I know in future they will, and I'm not saying that these shouldn't be in place. They should, because we need to move forward. But we have to think where we're putting them and put them strategically right.
Councillor Surgeon?
Thank you, Chair. Can I ask the officers to just clarify, is the charging points in Lidl public land that taxi drivers can utilise? And secondly, can you just expand and clarify the size and the measurements of the new disabled parking proposals? Thank you.
So I haven't got the exact sizes of them because I didn't think that question would come up tonight, but they'll be to the current standard. So they might not be exactly the same size as the ones that are there, but the ones that are there might not even be the current standard, so they will be to the current standard because we wouldn't put them in otherwise for the blue badge users. Okay.
And just if I'll take the question in terms of the Lidl. I can't comment specifically on what the policy for the Lidl car park is because I've not looked at it or seen it. But from my experience, if you like, in terms of supermarket car parks, they only often want their customers to be using car parking bays in their car park and charging their vehicles at the car parking bay. So if a taxi driver is going in as a customer and also wants to charge their car at the same time, they can do. But I think if I can take this opportunity just to clarify a couple of things maybe in terms of the discussion we've been having, if that's okay with you, Chair?
Yes, go on.
It's just to draw a distinction tonight in terms of, again, what we're here to look at is the planning decision and the planning merits of what's before us. It's not for us to decide, is this the right council policy to look at electric vehicle charging points just for taxis, or is this precisely the right location for those? What we're looking at is, would what's being proposed as a development be harmful in terms of the street scene, for example, and how it would look in terms of the new charging points. And from the point of view of provision of parking, are we content that what is being lost is either being replaced in terms of the disabled bays, or that the loss overall of parking bays, of a few parking bays, can be accommodated? And that's all we can really consider from a planning point of view in this application. As I say, we have to separate out the separate decision that the council will have to make about whether they choose to implement this permission in the future.
Has anybody else got any comments? I think what's been said here clearly is that this planning application is impossible to refuse because it actually meets all planning conditions. But I think that what has been said by Councillor Pythian and also to myself is that the council, in its position as provider of these facilities, will relook at the positioning of them and subsequently make it probably another application. But all I can put, Councillor Gloucester.
That is a ridiculous statement to make, because how can you approve something on planning and then go back and look at it and well, I know that you can, but why would you do that? I just don't understand the mentality behind doing that. If it's not right, it's not right, and you need to openly admit that, and then put the right thing forward.
You've been on this committee quite some time, and we are looking at things from a planning point of view, and whether an application meets planning requirements. In this particular case, it certainly does meet planning requirements. If the actual applicant decides after some time to relocate them, that is their prerogative. But we are tonight just looking at the conditions of the application and whether it is an application that is approved, be able to approve. And there really is no reason why we can refuse this application. Unless you want to move refusal on what grounds?
I wasn't going to move refusal. I'm going to propose a deferral until the local authority decides where the charging point should be, how big the disabled bays could be, and brings us some information that we can make a decision on, knowing what they're talking about. I just don't appreciate being told one thing and then being told that the leader of the council can change it willy-nilly. It's wrong.
Unfortunately, that's what I asked the planning officer, whether we would be able to defer this tonight after receiving that information. His advice is that because the application is before us, we cannot defer it unless there is a sound planning reason for deferring it. Is that correct, Mr.
Yes. In short, I mean, ultimately, I understand what your concern is, Councillor Gloucester, but in terms of the point where we're at now, SATEC committee, there has been no request to withdraw this application from the applicant, and bearing in mind the applicant is Transport for Greater Manchester and the council in this application. There's been no request to withdraw the application, so it is before us tonight, and on the planning merits of what's before us, we can't simply defer something if there's no planning basis for deferring it. And at the moment, there is no planning basis for deferring it, so it's been put before us.
Councillor Nassim.
Thank you, Chair. Just wanted to ask you what the gentleman pointed out about the size of the vehicles or the size of the taxis. Can we put a condition on, like, you know, obviously minibuses, if that is a safety aspect and if that is a planning aspect of, you know, of tonight, would minibuses be able to charge?
So that would be more about a parking enforcement issue, and again, not something that we can necessarily control through planning. I think what I would point out is that at the moment, for example, the disabled parking bays, if there's a minibus with a disabled badge, they can park in the disabled parking bay, and so there's no difference in that sense. But yeah, so it becomes down to a parking enforcement issue about whether, if the parking enforcement officers consider the vehicle to be either parked inappropriately or to be too large for the space they would issue a ticket.
Councillor Gloucester, you wanted to come back?
Yeah, I've just had a look and the actual registration date of this was September 22. So it's not an old application, you know, it's not likely to go out of time or anything. Are you now telling me that the local authority just wants to push ahead with this regardless? And, you know, anyway, forget all that because obviously it's going to happen. I still propose a deferral because I think it's absolutely bang out of order.
On what grounds are you deferring it?
The size of the disabled bays aren't sufficient.
Well, that's totally incorrect. The size of the disabled bays have to meet the the size of the disabled bays, as the officer has said, have to meet the prescribed standard.
That depends which standard we're working on. I would expect to see what the current standard is in this document and the assurance that those bays will be meeting that standard. The information isn't in there, so whoever drew the plans up for the applicant is shoddy.
Wendy, could you confirm that that is the case?
So as I've already said, we're just looking at the documents. Have you got the documents for the planning app? I didn't anticipate this would come up today because to me, we wouldn't install any disabled spaces on the car park that didn't meet the current standards. So it was more like breathing. So I do apologise for not having the dimensions, but we wouldn't. So I think we need to slightly maybe not concentrate on that as much because the blue badge holder spaces will be to the current standard. Maybe that isn't.
I just don't think it's clear because on the map it doesn't look like will go into that area. It clearly doesn't look that way. Now either the map's not to scale, the map's wrong, or I don't know. But for me sitting here, it doesn't look correct. And the applicant, you know, the objector has clearly brought that up as an agenda. And I'm pretty sure he's been round with his tape measure, measuring it, to be quite frank. I do disagree with this taxi and private hire vehicle on it's actually a small car park for Royton Shopping Centre, that. It's always rammed. You can never park on it. And I've no issue with the charging points if they can be used and the disabled bays are sufficient for the need that's required there. But this report doesn't tell me any of that, and I think it's just really wrong. The local authority should be setting a standard here, and we're just not doing that, and it really is shoddy. I'm sorry.
So I can give you the sorry, Chair. Can I carry on? I can give you the assurance that the disabled bays will be to the current standard, or we wouldn't put them in. As an aside, the electric vehicle charging policies as a whole are emerging, and we're working so that in the future there might be more EV charging points in the car park for other users to use as well. But this is a starting point, providing them for the taxi drivers and private hire vehicles.
Councillor Pythian.
I just wanted to double check that this application is for electric vehicle charging points, isn't it, yeah?
Yes.
Thank you.
Councillor Nassim.
Just to go back on Councillor Gloucester's point, there's 3 disabled parkings there and being replaced by 2, aren't they, in the current measurement? So, is that right? Is it 4?
It's going to be replaced by 4.
Yeah, that's right.
Councillor Williamson.
Thank you, Chair. So, why are we putting these in the car park centre if taxi drivers requested it? Thank you.
Okay, so first of all, before I answer, I'll clarify that the end user of these charging points is not a planning issue. Again, we're looking at the physical impact of what's being proposed, and is there still sufficient parking provision generally in the car park. But to answer your question, in terms of what I'm aware of with this proposal, the this and the previous two applications are three of, I'm not sure quite how many, but several applications across Greater Manchester that are coming forward to make specific provision for electric vehicle charging for taxis and private hire vehicles, because obviously as we know, as we're moving forward, petrol and diesel vehicles will not be allowed to be made anymore, and we'll all be having to move gradually to electric vehicles. Taxi drivers are particularly being encouraged to do so. The amount of driving they do and therefore the pollution that will come from the exhaust of a taxi and what have you. We want to encourage as many taxi operators to convert to electric vehicles. So to do that, we need to provide specific charging points for them across the borough, so that they are able to charge easily and quickly and carry on their business. So yeah, these three applications are three of a suite across Greater Manchester as a starting point to start to roll that out. And in as Mr Moore has said earlier, in terms of electric vehicle for charging points for other vehicles, for private vehicles, we're exploring that as well, and where we may begin to roll out more charging points on our car parks for that as well. But this is, say, looking at the planning merits of this particular application in isolation. It's not about who's using the charging points, it's about what are the physical impacts of the charging points, and is there still enough parking provision after you've provided these.
We do have a proposal anyway that this is deferred. I don't know whether that still stands. Councillor Gloucester, we were talking. No, I'm just saying I was just saying, have you formally proposed that this is deferred, and is that seconded? Right. And on what grounds are you going to defer it after you've had an assurance that the disabled parking bays will be up to standard?
Because of the conversation.
I'm asking the mover of the...
I think the conversation went that there's no way 4 spaces will fit where they're being proposed. And I believe that. I believe that there isn't sufficient space for 3 disabled parking spaces in the proposed area, because I cannot see it in front of me. So I don't believe it. I'm sorry. And that is why I'm saying defer it. Let's get the proper information on paper with measurements in front of us, just so that we know. And if the leader wants to change it, she's got ample chance to change it in time for the next meeting.
Right, it's been moved and seconded deferral. All those in favour of deferral, please show. That's 2. All those against, please show.
6.
Those abstaining. Right. Okay. I appreciate that this has been an awkward decision. I could make some comments on what's been said as a daily user of that car park. You know, the speaker didn't mention heavy goods vehicles, especially on Thursday, taking all the parking spaces and various things like that, large vehicles of actual shopkeepers and that actually use the car park and fill it up. But having said that, I think that we're where we are now, and you know, I believe the ward councillors have made some representations, and let's hope that you know, there'll be a satisfactory result in the end. So could I move that we approve this application? Is that seconded? Yeah. All those in favour?
7 in favour, Chairman.
Those against?
2.
2, thank you. So that's approved. If we move on to the next application, which is, I think and believe Councillor Hussain will have to excuse himself. Sorry? If you wish. next item on the agenda involves an application where a councillor is the owner of the property, which is 49 Newport Street, Oldham. Can I ask you to present the application, please?
The application relates to the erection of a first floor side extension and the installation of additional solar panels on the front roof slope of the proposed extension and the side roof slope of the existing dwelling. The application site is a detached two-storey dwelling. It has been referred to committee as the applicant is an elected member representing Wornath Ward. Those are the current elevations. The proposed application, the proposed extension would be above the side extension here. That's what the application dwelling looks like at the moment. The proposed first floor extension would measure 3.8 metres wide and would be 11 metres long. It would be sited directly above the existing single-storey side projection. The proposed extension would be constructed of materials to match the host dwelling, and the ridge line would match that of the host dwelling. Solar panels would be sited along the front roof plane of the proposed extension. Oh, excuse me, sorry about that. Sorry about that. Here, and then along the side roof plane there. The proposed extension is considered to be subordinate to the host dwelling. It would be in line with the existing front and rear elevations of the dwelling and would therefore have limited impact on the visual amenity of the street scene or on the neighbouring dwelling in terms of overshadowing. There's approximately a 2.5 metre gap to the side boundary with the neighbouring property, which can be seen there.
Right, thanks very much indeed. Has anybody got any questions of the officer? No. Is there any comments anybody would like to make? No. In that case, could I move approval?
Second that.
Thank you. All those in favour of approval, please show. Right, thanks very much, Jindy. If we then can move on to the next item on the agenda, which is a major development at Royal Oldham Hospital. And I think Mr. Lee's going to present this. Mr. Lee.
Thank you, Chair. So yes, the item 14 is the Royal Oldham Hospital on Rochdale Road in Oldham, and the application, as you can see on the screen, proposes the partial demolition of the Cafe Royal and J Block and the erection of a 4-storey extension to the main building with landscaping and the associated works. So in terms of the site itself, for those that know it, because the site is very large and prominent community assets, if you like, for Oldham. But the actual application site itself comprises a smaller sub-part of the site within a central location, which is within the red line boundary that you can see on the plan here. So it's currently occupied by a group of relatively small single-storey and 2-storey buildings, and then flanked by the much more substantial main hospital building. So the proposal itself follows an earlier phase of development adjacent to the application site, and this forms the next stage of a strategic plan involving the demolition of part of the existing small buildings, which you can see in the foreground of the image in the background, and the erection of a 4-storey extension to the main hospital building. And it would accommodate 2 24-bed wards with the ancillary operational and storage space. So the key issues for consideration for this application relate to the principle of the development, its design and appearance, highway safety, amenity, the ground conditions, ecology and energy, and you'll see from the report there's a section on each of those main topic areas with references to the relevant local plan policies. So in short, in terms of the principle is supported by our local plan policy 2, given that it represents development which will support the improvements to health and well-being of Oldham residents, and is further supported by the aims and objectives of the National Planning Policy Framework. So although the building, which is of a substantial size, as you can appreciate from the description and the images that you can see in terms of the elevation plans, it will mainly be visible from only within the wider hospital grounds, and the design, scale and massing is considered to be compatible and complementary to the surrounding buildings against which it would be seen against. So there is, from the images you've seen in terms of the aerial views and the photographs, there's no uniform design to the buildings. There is a mix because of the way the hospital has evolved over a period of time. But the the design would integrate with everything that's going on around it and complement the earlier phase 4A development, which is immediately adjacent to the site. The main impact on amenity would arise from noise, and on that basis a noise assessment has been submitted with the application, which has not attracted any objections for environmental health. But it is important to recognise that there are significant interface distances between the application site itself and the nearest residential dwellings. So in short, subject to the imposition of the conditions that are on the recommendation, the application is recommended for approval. But one important thing to note is the content of the late list, which makes some minor amendments to conditions 5, 7 and 8. So that's the introduction, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Has anybody got any comments on Mr. Lee's presentation? No? Any questions? Okay. If nobody has, could I go to Mr. Should have put my glasses on, really.
Mr. Jago.
Mr. Jago, who's supporting the application.
Thank you. Good evening, councillors. My name is David Jago and I am the Chief Officer at Oldham Care Organisation, which is part of the Northern Care Alliance. The proposed extension to the Royal Oldham Hospital represents a £28 million investment in Oldham and builds upon our current Phase 4 development. The proposed extension is critical to replace outdated facilities, accommodate high levels of demand for specialist and care and enhance the viability of hospital services. The proposal will make a significant contribution to aims by improving the capacity at the Royal Oldham Hospital to provide quality healthcare services for residents of Oldham, Bury, Rochdale and North Manchester. Phase 4B will look to address a lack of general and acute beds throughout the Royal Oldham site and the impact this capacity deficit has on the performance of services on this site. It will also address historic underinvestment on the Royal Oldham site, resulting in some of the poorest quality accommodation across Greater Manchester and the associated impact on staff and patient experiences. And it will ensure that the Royal Oldham Hospital has a strategic transition to become a high acuity surgical hub for Greater Manchester and the estate that needs to reflect that ambition. And importantly, it will help support resolve the fundamental health inequalities that exist across Greater Manchester and particularly within Oldham, having some of the poorest outcomes. And we know that 14 of our 20 wards in terms of health deprivation are in the top 20% index of multiple deprivation. This facility will absolutely support our ambition to drive out those inequalities for our residents in Oldham. Members may be aware that the main building at the Royal Oldham Hospital site was specifically designed to accommodate future expansion, and this was supported by the first phase of development on this site, Phase 4A, which is currently under construction, and we look forward to opening that in August 23. The next phase in this development, Phase 4B, will provide a 4-storey building providing additional inpatient beds alongside a 24-bedded new critical care unit and relocated endoscopy provision as part of Phase 4 fit-out. The design of the extension is a positive addition to the aesthetics of the existing hospital buildings, taking cues from Oldham's mill heritage using warm tone elevations, references to tower details and elongated window design. The building will be surrounded by the landscaping schemes approved throughout Phase 4A, and we link into the extension to Fountain Gardens, which many will know is at the heart of the hospital and key to pedestrian routes to the site. We are introducing a one-day-a-week campaign as part of our site-wide travel plan that asks non-clinical staff to work from home or take public transport at least once a week to help reduce the impact on the hospital on the local road network. We are confident that the comprehensive travel planning measures will be effective, particularly as COVID-19 pandemic has quickly helped to normalise working from home among non-clinical staff. On behalf of the Northern Care Alliance, I urge members to support this important development that will significantly improve health outcomes and reduce health inequalities for patients in the north east of Greater Manchester and beyond. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Jago. Has anybody got any questions of Mr. Jago? No? Okay, thank you very much. I'll open it up for discussion. Anybody got any comments or concerns? Councillor Williamson?
Just a comment, really. I mean, this is another lot of building work that's going to happen at Oldham Royal. And when I last went, which is not that long ago, there's still building work that's taking place near to the Dinwoody building. So this, on top of that makes it really difficult for patients who have to go to certain parts of the hospital, but they can't get through because it's blocked because of building work. So I just hope that has been taken into consideration, I suppose. I suppose more of an observation. I'm sorry, Chair.
No, I think it's a good observation, Mr. Jago. I have noticed the difficulty myself, and I think are these developments going to run simultaneously, or is the new development going to take place on completion of the present one?
Correct, Chair. The new development will take place after completion of Phase 4A, so there will be no duplication of those challenges for the residents of Oldham on the Royal Oldham estate.
Thank you. Councillor Surgeon.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to thank Mr. Jago for your comments and everything. As the councillor for this area, I welcome the development, and I think it's a huge amount of investment which would be good not just for the residents of the ward but across the borough. And you know, hopefully this can become a flagship hospital for many across the borough as well. So I'd like to move to the vote, and I'd like to support the recommendations.
Thank you. Is there any further comments anybody would like to make? No. I think in general, I think everybody really welcomes this because it's extra capacity which we haven't had for some time. So all those in favour, please show.
It's unanimous, Chairman.
Thank you very much indeed. That's unanimous. If we go to the last item on the agenda, which is the appeals update, which is presented for noting.
Yeah, just for noting.
Has anybody got any questions of it? No? Okay then. Thanks very much indeed for your attendance.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you.